Welcome to Hoardganize with professional organizer Rachel Seavey. Every Sunday at 6 p.m., Rachel shares her expertise and compassionate approach to help you deal with overwhelming clutter. Rachel?
Hey, collectors! Welcome to the Hoardganize Podcast. I'm your host, professional organizer Rachel Seavey, and tonight's episode is here to help you understand chronic disorganization and how it differs from hoarding disorder. This episode is super special to me. It's based on a speech that I created with my colleague and mentor, Geraldine Thomas. She's a very well-known professional organizer in the field, and I'm actually super excited. She's going to be on the air with me in person for our 100th episode. Anyway, I've given this speech in front of law enforcement, code enforcement, firefighters, professional organizers, realtors, in-home support services, and I've given the speech countless times to collectors just like you. And this information is going to really help you understand your situation from a professional standpoint. Are you a hoarder or not? In a nutshell. This is also a great episode for professional organizers, therapists, or anyone working with the overly cluttered population. Code enforcement. So many times you walk into a situation or you see some stuff on photos and you think, oh my gosh, this person's a hoarder. I don't know what to do. Well, this episode is just for you. It's going to help you identify if this person that you're working with truly is a hoarder and the kinds of strategies you should take with them, whether or not they are. Now, 90% of the people that I work with, and I'm just making up numbers here, but it feels right, 90% that I work with think of themselves as a hoarder before we actually work together. They call me up and they, say they need help with their hoarding, or they send me this really long email about how they're such a hoarder. And of that 90% of the people that call me themselves, I have, other outside sources that call me for people, but of 90% of the people that call me themselves, I'd say 5% of those, and this is just my professional opinion, actually were hoarders. Most of my clients are just disorganized. Not all, but most. And most of my clients are chronically disorganized. Now, some of you are situationally disorganized. Maybe you were organized until you were divorced, or you had an event, or you got sick, or a disability that threw you off kilter. And so now you just need a fresh start. I won't be covering situational disorganization tonight, but I will be covering chronic disorganization. So what is chronic disorganization? I have a client that I've been working for years. We've just celebrated our anniversary together. And about a year ago, we had a heart-to-heart. She asked me, Rachel, am I a hoarder? And I actually told her no, that I thought she was chronically disorganized. This was based on my working with her, my seeing her ability to always be open to letting go of stuff. So no, she's chronically disorganized. She told me that was a mouthful. It is. It's a lot of syllables, I suppose. But after digesting my comment, she agreed that she was, after I explained to her what chronic disorganization was. And it actually brought her a bunch of relief to learn that she wasn't a hoarder. And understanding the fundamentals of chronic disorganization has really helped her be kinder to herself when she has setbacks. And, the word hoarder is pretty harsh. And I like to think of all of my clients as humans. And a very small population of my clients do suffer, I like to emphasize suffer, from hoarding disorder. However, don't get me wrong, a lot of you have hoarding tendencies. And to an inexperienced eye, this can be confusing. And that's why it's important as a professional organizer, a coach, a therapist, the police, to have this sort of insight too. You can't just judge a book by its cover. I've seen many large piles of clutter, but a lot of them are actually not caused by hoarding. Hoarding tendencies are perhaps you have, you're very green, you're environmentally very conscious, so you tend to hoard items because you don't want them going into the landfill. Now, that's something like a hoarding tendency. However, it doesn't cause you great pain to let them go. I mean, you'd rather reuse them. But if you had to let them go, you'd let them go. And if somebody offered you money for these things, for sure, you'd get rid of your recycling. So some of you have these hoarding tendencies, or they're just wishful thinking, maybe I'll fit into that one day. Maybe one day I'll use that thing. Okay. I mean, these are just tendencies. You're not literally crying if a bag of trash goes out. So let's start with chronic disorganization. And I just like to say it's certainly not words that I came up with by myself, but it totally makes a lot of sense. So I'm rolling with it. It's from the ICD, which is the school that I have many certificates from, the Institute for Challenging Disorganization. Talked about them a lot on my podcast. ICD, their website is challengingdisorganization.org. And their mission is to provide education, research, and strategies to benefit people challenged by chronic disorganization. And one of the programs, they have many professional organizing programs, and I have many certificates in this. So, okay, let's define chronic disorganization. The definition of chronic disorganization is you have a past history of disorganization. Your clutter is undermining the current quality of life. You've got failed self-help efforts to change. And there's an expectation of future disorganization. So what does this mean? Okay, the first line item is that you have a past history of disorganization. Most of the people that I work with have been disorganized for over a year. The majority of the people that I work with have been disorganized for decades. So there's piles of clutter. I mean, those take a while to accumulate. And, you could have been in an accident many years ago. It's altered your physical capabilities, or possibly you feel like you've always been disorganized. I mean, there are so many reasons why you could be disorganized, and why people clutter is one of my most favorite topics to talk about. If you haven't noticed, I have many podcasts for you to listen to help you understand why you clutter. But this podcast is to help you understand what category of disorganization you fall into professionally. So the first line item of describing chronic disorganization is you have a past history of disorganization. So the second line item is your clutter is undermining your current quality of life. So your current quality of life is undermined due to your disorganization. And lots of people have clutter. It's about your threshold. If you feel like your daily living activities, which are, sleeping, eating, going to the bathroom, if you feel like your daily life is undermined, you absolutely qualify. I mean, if you're not able to prepare meals, sleep in your bed, find important items, make it places on time, use your bathroom, your disorganization is undermining your daily life. And the third line item is you've got failed self-help efforts of changing. So you've tried to get organized probably many times, but nothing seems to work. You've read all the books, you've watched all the YouTubes, and you still can't manage to get organized. You know why? Because conventional organizing methods do not work for the chronically disorganized. Okay, we'll get into some strategies that do work later. And the last qualification of chronic disorganization is that you have an expectation of future disorganization. I mean, the way things are looking right now, you're going to be disorganized in the future. It's pretty straightforward. If you keep shopping and bringing things in, you're going to constantly struggle with organization. So let's go over those again. So you've got your past history of disorganization, check. Undermining your current quality of life, whatever that means to you. Failed self-help efforts to change, and expectation of future disorganization. Now, what are some characteristics that come with chronic disorganization? I mean, you're constantly losing or misplacing items and information. There are uncompleted projects. There's difficulty managing time. I mean, does that sound like you? I'm sure it does, and that's my point. Most of the people that I work with are chronically disorganized, and they usually have multiple reasons on why. Now, here's where it's just a little confusing, but you can be chronically disorganized and have hoarding disorder. To me, that makes a lot of sense. But you can also be chronically disorganized and not have hoarding disorder. So let's see. Let's give yourself a diagnosis. I'm no doctor, as we know that. So let's see if you feel like you qualify, or if your professional organizer listening, if your client qualifies to really be suffering from hoarding disorder. And while you might feel like you're a hoarder, and while your house might look like identical to the house of someone with hoarding disorder, the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria for hoarding is this. And I know you've heard this one. It's on the shows. Persistent difficulty or parting with possessions, regardless of their actual value. So that's the pretty common definition of hoarding, but it actually has, there's a lot more in the DSM-5 about hoarding. So I'd like to go over it so that you can understand the seriousness of the hoarding disorder situation. And if you truly are a hoarder, that's okay. I've got strategies for you too. But it's really good to understand what the professional criteria for hoarding is. And if you don't fall into this, then it's most likely you're chronically disorganized, which, I mean, in lots of cases sucks too. I'm not trying to downplay your situation, but if you understand what category you fall into, you can get a really good start on what strategies to use, what's going to work with someone that has true hoarding disorder. Might be overkill for somebody that's chronically disorganized. So there are different methods and strategies and techniques. As a professional organizer, as a life coach, I know there's therapists out there that do lots of different things based on whether or not you're truly a hoarder. So persistent difficulty. This is like persistent, nonstop difficulty of parting with possessions regardless of their actual value. And this difficulty is due to a perceived need to save the items and the distress associated with discarding them. The difficulty discarding possessions results in the accumulation of possessions that congest and clutter active living areas and substantially compromises their intended use. If living areas are uncluttered, it is only because of the interventions of a third party. For example, a family member, professional organizer, authorities. The hoarding causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. This includes maintaining a safe environment for yourself and others. And your hoarding is not attributed to another medical condition. For instance, brain injury, Prosser-Willis syndrome. These kind of medical conditions do bring on hoarding disorder. And the hoarding is not better explained by the symptoms of another mental disorder. For example, obsessions and obsessive compulsive disorder, delusions and schizophrenia, or another psychotic disorder. And lastly, the hoarding is not better explained by the symptoms of another mental disorder. For example, obsessions and obsessive compulsive disorder, delusions and schizophrenia, or another psychotic disorder, cognitive deficits and major neurocognitive disorder, and restricted interests and autism spectrum disorder. Hoarding disorder itself is truly in its own category. So if you still if you feel like you might have some hoarding disorder after listening to that criteria, that's okay. There's no judgment. That's what my podcast is all about. And I will offer some tips for everyone at the end. However, most of you will hear this and say, well, I can walk throughout my house or most of my rooms, and I might have a catch-all room that's completely full to the brim, but I can use my bathroom, and, if trash gets thrown out, hey, good for it. I don't get stressed out. I'm not worried about what other people are handling. If it's obvious trash, let's get rid of it. So hoarding disorder is much more serious than you think. It's a mental disorder. It totally takes over your house and your life. It causes you great pain, like the grief of losing a loved one, just to see garbage leave your home. So you can have hoarding disorder, as I said before, and be chronically disorganized. But in my professional opinion, most of you are chronically disorganized. Does that make sense? And while your home can look absolutely identical to that of someone with hoarding disorder, you're totally open to making space and to letting things go. Maybe you just can't physically, or maybe you find it hard to concentrate, or you don't know where to start, or all of the above. But you're open to getting organized. Most of the true people with hoarding disorder, I work with these people, and they're usually referred to me by a therapist, a lot more of the times a police officer, code enforcement, adult protective services, aging services, social workers. Mostly, these people really don't want help in the first place, and now they're being forced to get help. So think about this, replay this, write this down. I really want you to understand what hoarding disorder is. It doesn't mean just because you have crap stacked up all over your dining room table and every flat surface is a catch-all, that does not mean you're a hoarder. It's okay if your laundry room is piled up, you can't even get to your laundry machine. You probably aren't a hoarder. Okay, so I hope that I've really helped you determine a little bit more on what category you fall into, or what category your client or the person that you're working with or your loved one falls into. If not, I'd like to really just address some other common factors of CD, chronic disorganization, for sure. Addictive tendencies. If you're on drugs or if you drink a lot, it's going to be really hard for you to clean up. Let's keep it real. I have seen many hoard lookalikes in a meth house. You think of meth addicts as being clean. No, that is absolutely not accurate in what I've seen. Okay, or so many empty wine bottles, beer bottles, and the biggest addictive tendency that I come across, opioids, constant opioids. I mean, there are so many things out there. You've got your fast food, you've got your sugar. I mean, no matter what you look at it, there are a lot of addictive tendencies that we all have. I mean, here I am drinking my cup of coffee, right? So, no judgment. It's just if you're addicted to something, if you're drinking a lot, it's probably affecting whether or not you're going to be organized, stay organized, if you're motivated to get organized. Aging issues. Okay, that's something I talk about a lot. It's pretty straightforward. As we age, things get harder for us to do. Okay, so if you're aging and you're finding it harder to clean up your house, that's okay. That's normal. Learning style differences. I work with a lot of people that have dyslexia, or they're on the spectrum, or I'm not quite sure what's going on, but they've got some learning style differences. And I am a master at learning styles. I love learning styles. I love learning your learning style so that I can teach you in a way that you will learn. So if you've got some learning style differences, maybe you should understand what your learning style is. If you're best learn, if you're an audio type learning style, if you listen and you hear and that's how you learn, then maybe you should, continue listening to podcasts and continue watching YouTube and submersing yourself in that kind of a learning style environment for your organization. Same with, aside from auditory, you have your visual learners. You've got people that really learn best watching other people. So, watch me on YouTube, watch other people on YouTube, watch organizing shows. You might not be able to focus unless there's something that you can actually visualize and look at. And then you've got kinesthetic. Kinesthetic is hands-on. Some people, I'm hopefully a little bit of all three, but I'm incredibly kinesthetic. I like to do things hands-on when it comes to my learning style. I like to physically touch the thing, put it where it needs to go, and that's how I learn where it belongs. And sometimes you're a little bit of all three, like me. You're visual, you're auditory, and you're kinesthetic. But try and learn what your dominant learning style is, and immerse yourself in teachings and organization that support that. Next, we have lifestyle choices. Let's keep it real. People would much rather go out on dates. I've got a client that's more concerned about her Tinder profile than her, massive amounts of clutter throughout her house. You've got, like I said, the addictive tendencies. Maybe you'd rather come home and just plop on the couch and eat a pizza and watch TV after work. I mean, these are lifestyle choices. You're making the decision to sit down on the couch and veg out. Of course, there are mental health issues that definitely can bring on disorganization, depression for sure. I mean, if you're suffering from depression, if you're feeling really down and in the dumps, you're not going to want to pull yourself up and go do your dishes. You're not going to want to pull yourself up and go do your laundry, especially if you hate doing that kind of stuff. I mean, let's keep it real. We've also got some neurologically based conditions, which I'll be going into a little bit pretty shortly here. So I'll quickly skip over that. And you've got physical challenges. I mean, that's something I talk about all the time. If you're injured or if you've aging or you've got physical challenges, it is hard to keep things up the way you used to, or maybe you've never been able to. I work with people that are in wheelchairs. I've worked with people that are missing limbs. I've worked with all sorts of people. And if you've got physical challenges, if you can't bend over and pick up something that you've dropped, you've most likely got clutter. Traumatic life events. Someone you love unexpectedly dies. You go through a divorce. You lose your job. These are all, they could cause you situational disorganization, and they could be the beginning of your chronic disorganization. Maybe some events happened to you a couple decades ago and the clutter piled up and you've just never really been able to get it together in your home. So back to the neurological challenges, because these can really affect clutter. And the main neurological challenge that I actually encounter quite a bit is attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADD, ADHD, whatever you want to call it. It is attention and focusing problems. I absolutely encourage you to go to your physician and see if you have ADHD. If you feel like you're constantly distracted, or if people tell you you're constantly distracted, or if you feel like you have ADD or ADHD, please go get tested. It will really, 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 really help you. Because when you have these kinds of neurological challenges, you're not even able to access your executive functioning part of the brain. So cut yourself a little slack. Once you realize if you have ADHD, you're not even able to access your organizing and your prioritizing parts of your brain, you're going to really try and find some other ways to get organized and prioritize. And there's so many books and resources out there. I've got several podcasts on ADHD and clutter, but it's definitely the number one neurological challenge that I encounter in the field, and strongly encourage people to get diagnosed. I'm not for or against medication. I've seen it work and not work for people, but what I've seen is a clarity and almost a forgiveness of self once people realize that they do have it. And it's a real thing. I know there are people out there that don't believe in ADHD. I am actually one of those people that do. So, some other neurological challenges that I face are Parkinson's disease. That's a really, really tough one. Oh my goodness. I can't tell you how many wives that I've worked with and their husbands have Parkinson's, and all of a sudden the husbands are, stashing things where just unreasonable things in unreasonable places, things that they've never done in their entire life again. And it's not just a man woman thing. That's just something that I've observed, where I don't even know where the science is based, but I have worked with many wives that have husbands with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, and it is very, very difficult. And absolutely, they hoard or they become irrational with their belongings. It's actually something that's quite common. Fibromyalgia is actually another neurological challenge that I face. It's really hard when you're fatigued, when you've got cognitive difficulties. It gives you emotional difficulties. You've got limited mobility. Fibromyalgia can cause attention problems. So definitely, if you've got fibromyalgia, definitely give yourself a break. These conventional organizing styles, this perfectionist, that's not going to work for you. You've got to find some things that work for you. Some other mental health challenges, like I discussed before, you've got OCD. A lot of the times I'll see people with OCD and ADHD, and that is a big clutter creator. And many of you listening might have that combination. So these are two big things that are going to stop you from getting organized. Like I said, depression. Who wants to get up and do anything when they're depressed? Anxiety. Anxiety is something I see a lot. People are really anxious, to have me in their home. They're anxious to make the wrong decision. They're anxious of what if they need that thing in the future. And so nothing gets done. Going back to lifestyle choices. And this is something that, you just got to kind of be hard on yourself. Be real with yourself. Do I sit on the couch instead of decluttering? This is a lifestyle choice. And when you make that kind of lifestyle choice, you have too much stuff. You've got a lack of goals. You've got prioritizing issues. You've got overscheduling. Instead of doing the things that you need to be doing, my dear, you are being a couch potato. And, I'm guilty of it every now and then, but if you're constantly sitting on the couch versus getting organized, then it's a lifestyle challenge. It's a lifestyle choice. And that's going to give you stress and chronic tardiness and strained relationships. And of course, the big P word, procrastination. So it's really hard, but it's really important that you are honest with yourself. Oh, I'm tired after. No, I'm being lazy. I mean, we're all tired after work. We all have a million things going on, my dear. It's your choosing to make the decision to not work on your clutter. And that's causing you more clutter and more grief and more stress and more depression. So be honest with yourself. Am I being lazy? Would I rather sit down and have a glass of wine and watch the news than tackle my clutter? And it's okay. Yes, you could say yes, but what you actually do is what matters, right? And now, if you're a professional organizer, if you're somebody, a family member listening to this, you're not actually the person with the clutter. I've really got some rules, excuse me. And it sounds like rules, but I've really got some suggestions, let's call them, for you, because I get very ticked off when I hear about the judgment and the ridicule and the shame that's caused by other people onto people with clutter. I have a gal that I'm working with right now, and I don't know if you follow me on Facebook, but oh my God, like I swear you can't even get into her door. You have to army crawl throughout the top to dip down into her living room. It's really a sad situation. I mean, I'm an overly empathetic person to begin with, but I mean, people like this are why I love doing what I do. This is the kindest, sweetest, smartest animal lover, funny, can make fun of herself, sees humor in the whole thing. I mean, this is an incredibly wonderful, independent, beautiful woman. Okay. School bus driver, retired school bus driver. I like to be as anonymous as I can. I kind of hope you're listening, honey. But if you are, you aren't. I obviously would never say your name. But I've got a real problem with her neighbors. She's got one that's banging on her door. I mean, she's already in there army crawling. Literally army crawling. Her back is touching the ceiling through her house, okay? And I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. She's got a neighbor that's banging on the door. Banging and harassing her constantly to cut down her lawn. But this asshole isn't even offering to do it for free or out of the kindness. He's telling her that she's bringing down the property values of the neighborhood, and he's trying to charge her for it. A low fee, a discounted fee. I mean, get the F out of here. I mean, how is this helpful? You're harassing, you're banging on the door. She doesn't even want to open it. She's already in there in a cocoon. And you're harassing her, you're shaming her, you're telling her she's bringing down the property values of the entire neighborhood. And you want to charge her to cut the grass? Like, what type of piece of work are you? Why don't you leave a nice note? Why don't you cut the grass for free? Why don't you leave her alone and realize that she has enough going on in her life where she doesn't need to be harassed by people that live around her? So, sorry, that was such a tangent. Anyway, if you're working with, or if you know someone that has excessive clutter, resist criticizing. Criticizing doesn't help. It really does not do anything. It will make this person withdraw more into their clutter, and they'll feel even worse about themselves. You can't shame someone into changing. You can't harass someone into changing, okay? You never want to ridicule the person. You want to listen without judgment. I have people, I mean, their houses are full to the brim and they're telling me how they want to, paint and re-carpet. You don't have to call someone out. Why don't you just listen without judgment? Maybe you don't agree with why they keep certain things or how much they're keeping or why they got in this situation. It's not your life. Listen without judgment. And you want to give full attention to the person when they speak. I've witnessed professional organizers that are so overwhelmed with the clutter themselves that they're not even giving full attention to the client. They're not giving you full attention. They're not giving me full attention. They're so overwhelmed with the clutter situation. So if overwhelming clutter is not your thing, don't try and work with people with hoarding disorder. Don't go in with a smirk on your face. Don't gasp. Don't say, "Oh my God." Be nice. Okay? Give full attention to the person when they speak. This could be a person that's incontinent. This could be a person that hasn't showered in many years. This could be a person that doesn't smell particularly good for whatever reason. Give them your full attention. Listen without judgment. Watch your facial expressions. Okay, if your family member is hoarding trash, don't tell them they're disgusting. Don't tell them it's disgusting. Don't make a big deal about it saying, it's obvious trash. This really, really isn't helpful. I know a lot of people think that tough love is something that's helpful. It really doesn't work with clutter. And you're going to want to never throw things out behind people's back. You're not going to clean up when the person is not there. That is not okay. And it's a last resource, even for code enforcement and to police officers, to clean up when the person is not there or when the person does not give them permission. I mean, you really want to respect that they're making the decision to change. You're not pressuring them to make the decision to change. You're not shaming them to make the decision to change. Okay? So what happens? What do you do if you have chronic disorganization? What do you do if you're like, okay, you know what? I feel like I have hoarding disorder and chronic disorganization. So what do you do? Here are some chronic disorganization success strategies for you. Number 1, be ready for change. Okay? Be ready for change. Change, death, and taxes, baby. Got a podcast on that one. Okay, you've got to be ready for change. It's going to be a drastic change when you get organized. Everything is going to be different. So be ready for that change. A lot of people are so surprised. I come with a full team. We completely reorganized their home, specifically catered to their needs. And they're shocked. I mean, there's just so much change. So just know, as you get organized, there's going to be a lot of change, and that's okay. Number 2, be patient. Be patient with yourself. I've worked with people, the same people, for many, many years. Many, many, many years. Be patient. Some people really need time to get organized. It could get done in 3 to 4 days with an organizing team. A lot of people like that option. But especially if you're working on your clutter by yourself, which I know many of my listeners are, be patient. Clutter didn't show up overnight. You didn't wake up one day and all of a sudden, tons and tons of clutter was dumped into your house by some mystery outside resource. No, it took a really long time for your house to get like that. And so be patient. Number 4, find creative solutions. Creative solutions, what are those? If you're watching YouTube and all the closets are color-coded and perfectly organized, that's not going to work for you if your clothing is in piles and you haven't even washed it for weeks. You've got to find creative solutions. If that means just washing your clothing and folding it and putting it into a laundry basket, or washing and drying your clothing and not folding it, but having a clean basket and a dirty basket. Find creative solutions. Conventional organizing methods won't work for you. Number 5, work with professionals who understand chronic disorganization. If you can afford to hire a professional organizer. Go on to challengingdisorganization.org, and search for a professional organizer by zip code in your area. Everyone that's listed on the ICD website is, in my opinion, if they've listened and learned with the classes that I've taken, they're qualified to work with people that have chronic disorganization. So work with professionals that understand it. You could consider finding a therapist that understands chronic disorganization, finding a life coach that understands chronic disorganization. You definitely want to work with someone that understands chronic disorganization and how it's vastly different and the same in many ways as hoarding disorder. Another thing that I want you to do is, if you do work with someone like me, or if you are working with a therapist or a life coach, disclose your medical and mental health conditions. That's super helpful for us. I mean, I'm not, a doctor or anything, but it's super helpful for me to know if you have ADHD. It's super helpful for me to know if you struggle with depression. It's super helpful for me to know if you take, Vicodin or Percocet or whatever, the Oxy. If you're taking that all day long, it's actually really helpful for me to know, because then I can understand why you're so lethargic, why you're unmotivated, or why you're depressed. Or so disclose your medical and mental health conditions to whoever you're working with. It's helpful. And with an organization, someone might say, oh my gosh, well, no wonder you're disorganized. You've got ADHD or Parkinson's or something like that. So please, please, please disclose your medical and mental health conditions to whoever you're working with. It's really helpful. Another less expensive way to tackle your clutter if you're chronically disorganized is by social organizing. There are social groups online for people that are disorganized. You might be able to have a friend or a neighbor that's, equally or somewhat as disorganized as you are, and maybe you can come over to each other's house and help each other. You could even try, hiring a house cleaner and scheduling maintenance that way, maybe a room at a time, or maybe they could just come in and clean the kitchen and the bathrooms. There's so many different ways that you can maintain an organized household, but definitely asking for help, which is my last suggestion, is delegating. Now, this could be expensive, it could be inexpensive. It can be done though. Delegate. If you've got just a neighbor or a high school kid taking the trash from your front door, not even coming in to the dumpster, that's delegating. That's great. That's wonderful. If you ask somebody, hey, I've got, 6 bags of clothing and I physically can't put it into my car, but can you come in and take it to the Goodwill for me? That's delegating. And if you have kids or a spouse in the home, delegate if you can. So hopefully, after listening to this, you are able to identify if you fall into the chronically disorganized category, and if you also fall into the hoarding disorder category. The most important thing is to understand yourself. That way you can understand what it's going to take to get organized. If you are watching this on YouTube, make sure your notification bell is clicked. Subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, and leave a comment. If you want to catch me out in the field, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter under Collector Care. Until next time, collectors, and remember, happiness is a place between too little and too much.
Now, a short ad break from Clarity Coaching.
Do you feel overwhelmed with clutter? Are you having trouble finding a place to start? Sometimes it's hard to ask for help, especially with all of the judgment and shame out there. What you need is an experienced, non-judgmental guide to help you navigate through your clutter chaos. I'm a guiding force that's going to help you empower yourself so you can live a happier, healthier, more organized life. I will take the time and I'm going to hold the space for you to understand your world, your dreams, your relationships, and your clutter. I do this with no judgment and no other agenda, but to help you achieve what you want most in life. And this, my dear collectors, is something that most people have never experienced. To experience a life that you truly desire, schedule your free clarity coaching session today by emailing me at rachel@collectorcare.com. That's rachel@collectorcare.com. Or call me directly. I'm at 925-548-7750. That's in America, so that's area code 1-925-548-7750. Clarity consultations are complimentary for individuals seeking my coaching services, and they're very useful to make sure that we're the right fit for each other. Stop living in chaos and start living the organized life you desire.
This has been Hoardganize with Rachel Seavey. New episodes are available every Sunday at 6 p.m. and also on the Collector Care YouTube channel. Download Rachel's Affirmations for Collectors on iTunes or Amazon.com, or sign up for Rachel's blog at collectorcare.com and receive 7 tips for clutter-free living. Thanks for listening.